All right. Welcome to the Business Influencer Podcast. I'm your host, Rey Perez, and I am very excited today. My special guest is Philip Auerbach. How you doing, Philip?
Good, Ray. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, thank you for being here. I'm very excited because what you do is very interesting. You give entrepreneurs and business owners and organizations the opportunity to get their message out to more people globally. And I'm very excited to share how you do that. But first, can you share a little bit about how you got started?
Oh, how I got started was a total accident. Basically, I run a 33-year-old language translation agency in very simple layman's terms. And I had a marketing consultancy. And one day, out of the blue, 33 years ago in San Francisco, I was approached by a group of translators who asked if I could bring them clients because they could do all the work and could I bring them the clients. And I have a master's degree in international marketing and I've studied 8 languages and speak 3. So I figured, all right, this is a good fit. Let's give it a go and see if it'll work. And here we are 33 years later.
Wow. I love that. That's a great story. And there's so many different benefits to being able to translate content, and there's all different types of content, which we'll get into in just a moment. But what would you say is the biggest benefit for an entrepreneur, a business owner, an organization, or a company to translate their products and services into other languages?
Well, ultimately, it's about being able to communicate their value to the world. And that means their products and services. It means ways to increase their revenue from other other means that they probably hadn't considered or hadn't thought of. So I think what's most important and most really impressive that most people don't know about is that about 60% of world internet users will only buy from you if your information is in their native language. And around only 20% of the world speaks English. So if people are not considering these other huge markets out there, they're missing huge opportunities. And another enormous opportunity is right here at home. There are around 42 million US Latinos who speak Spanish at home, making the US the second largest Spanish country in the world after Mexico. So if you're not considering either global markets or the domestic market, including other immigrant groups, then people are missing huge opportunities. And 2 other statistics that I'd like to give, and I know people's eyes may glaze over from numbers, but they're important to consider. In January of this year, 2024, the US exports of products alone totaled $257 billion. And US exports of services were $86 billion. So people who say, oh, we've got trade wars and there are tariffs and all of that, and so international markets are not worth anything. Either they're smoking a lot of ganja or they had a lot of gin and tonic for breakfast, because that's simply not true. So ultimately, what we do is, again, communicate people's value in other language markets, enable them to generate additional sources of revenue, share their product, the benefits of their products and services to a world audience, and basically brand them, their brand themselves, their company, their image, and to generate sales and leads and prospects. And interestingly, potentially speaking engagements and podcast interviews and consulting assignments from overseas prospects.
Now, there's a lot of different things you can translate, or content that you can translate. Give me a list of what are the most common products, services, content that can benefit an entrepreneur, a business owner, a company or organization to translate.
Well, the most common one should be the website, people's websites. And I've heard a lot of people say, oh, our website is not done or it's being updated. I can't translate it yet. Well, that makes no sense, because if you're not doing it, you're missing opportunities. So there are ways around that. Of course, you can translate your entire website, but you can also do what I call an abridged website. which is basically your home page, your contact page, and 2 or 3 key product pages. So that, if something else is being updated, you can still do that part. And there's another way around it, which is what I call a summary website. And very simply, it's a 1 or 2 page doc file that a person, would write, explaining the company's value. And just by doing a simple doc translation, a word translation, that can be, obviously write that in English, that can be put in, say, 20 languages. And those summaries can be put on a person's website with country flags and so forth. And that's a way of communicating your value proposition without spending a lot of time or money to do it. So in addition to websites, of course, there are videos, very important to do. And videos can be subtitled or dubbed, which we naturally can do. We can do books, and we can also do social media. And that's something people don't think about, that social media can be done in other languages as well to, again, encourage an international audience. So basically, anything client-facing, and that could include potentially contracts or instruction manuals or plans or policies, anything that could cause misunderstanding if left only in a native language, only in English, for example. All of this could be translated to present a person's value internationally.
I would assume email marketing as well, right? All your marketing emails could be translated as well.
Yes, certainly. Brochures, email messages, potentially text messages, all of it can be done. Yeah.
So let's talk about a little bit about videos, right? Because you said there's different ways that we can translate videos, that we can dub it or we can put subtitles. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, many people have videos, but they don't necessarily have the script from which the video was made. That's called a transcript. So we would start with a video, let's say it originates in English. The first step would be to create a transcript in English of the spoken video if the client does not have one. And from the transcript, we can then translate into an infinite number. Let's just say the top 120 languages that we routinely do. Once it's translated, we can then either go to dubbing, which is replacing the voice of the speaker with the target language, or subtitling, which is, of course, putting the written words under the image as the English words are being spoken.
Now, what would it be like if we were doing like this podcast? Like if I wanted to translate this podcast?
Well, we're going to do that. We're going to do that for our Latin America viewers. After it's finished, we will create a transcript, and then we will do subtitles in Spanish and Portuguese.
Wow. Now, what besides Spanish, right? Because I would say the number one, like you said earlier, besides English is Spanish in the world, but what other demographics have you experienced are really good to translate into those other languages?
Well, obviously it depends on what a person's target market is, but the most common language that we do is Spanish, which is primarily for both, again, US Latinos as well as Latin Americans. And in the language world, and this is sort of a bit of a trade secret, but we call it FIGS put, which is French, Italian, German, Spanish, Portuguese, which means Brazilian Portuguese, and then CJK, which means Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. And those are the most common world languages. One could also add Arabic to that potentially. And again, it depends on who the target audience is. So for example, we do a lot of work, we're based in California. We do a lot of work for California government agencies, translating for the ethnic populations in California. So for them, we put a lot of messages into Vietnamese, Russian, Tagalog, which is the major language of the Philippines. And I think I said Vietnamese, I'm not sure. That's another one. And potentially Armenian and Korean, depending again on where in California it's going.
So I heard you mention before that, if people are doing like a podcast or an interview in other languages, how can they do that if they don't speak the other language? How can they translate it?
So most people don't know, well, including presidents and the press corps do not know normally that the word translation is for conveying anything written and interpreting is to convey anything spoken.
Mm.
So when a person is potentially doing a podcast or an interview or a speaking assignment into another country, we can provide interpreters. And it's very key that they must be professionally trained interpreters. Hopefully I will get to the qualifications that we use for professional linguists. But it does not mean your neighbor who comes from there, or Maria down the hall who came here when she was 10, or your cousin who used to live in that country and thinks that he or she speaks the language. Because in most cases, people are speaking with somewhat technical terminology about their respective field or industry. So it's important to have professional interpreters, and interpreting can be done consecutively or simultaneously. Simultaneously is what you see at the UN. I'm speaking and someone is simultaneously at the same time putting my words into other languages using headphones for the listeners. Consecutive is I speak, I'm quiet, the interpreter interprets. People ask questions, the interpreter interprets back to me, I answer, and so forth. So those are the two kinds of interpreting. But it can be done, interpreting can be done on site. So if a person is invited, let's say, to a session in Peru, we can provide a Spanish professional interpreter, Spanish-English interpreter at that venue in Peru. It can also be done by Zoom or by Teams, so it can be done remotely online. And there's another way that, which is not directly related, but another service that we offer called OPI, over the phone interpreting. So if you'd like to make a phone call instantly, 24/7, with a supplier, a potential client, a prospect, or even an ethnic employee who doesn't speak much English, we have a way we can give you a toll-free number, basically a toll-free number, no expense phone number, and a PIN. And then you ask for the code for that language, or you say the code for the language you want, and you're connected within seconds to a third-party confidential interpreter who can then render your words into that language by telephone. And I'm sorry, that only works through English, by the way. So for the benefit of our Latin American listeners, we can only do it to or from English. We cannot do it, for example, Spanish to Arabic, although we can do that with translations. We cannot do the OPI, the phone interpreting that
with
way.
interpreting. Very cool. Well, I love that. And I mean, technology now has advanced so much. There's AI is taking over. So how is that affecting the translation business? And people think, oh, I can just get an AI to do my translation. Is that something that's possible nowadays?
Well, it's very possible. The issue is, do you want something done or do you want it done correctly? AI absolutely almost always makes mistakes. And even with common languages like Spanish, AI can still make mistakes. So the issue really becomes, again, do you want something done, just done, or do you want it done correctly? And if it's just done, if it does make mistakes, what does that communicate to potential clients about your own reliance on excellence, your own reliance on accuracy, your own caring about quality? Because again, if it's sort of second rate, what does that say about your image, your brand image? So AI does work, and our methods, and by the way, people think AI is something new. We've been doing it in the language business for at least 20 years. It's gone under different names. It's called, most people think of it as software translation. Professionally, it's called machine translation, but it's basically AI. And we've been doing this for at least 20 years. So we always do, if at all possible, it depends on the kind of file that we receive, but we always do an AI translation as a first pass. But then it must be done if you want accuracy, which is what we deliver, it must be done by professional human linguists with very specific qualifications. And those qualifications are that the person the people we use at a very high level. They must have master's degrees in the art of translating or interpreting. They must have done this ongoingly for 10 years, at least for 10 years. They must go into their native language only, which means that that's the way they know nuances and expressions. And they do cultural adaptation, which is extremely important. And then finally, they also speak the subject terminology. Whatever your subject terminology is, we assign a linguist who speaks that subject. Because, for example, real estate and science and biology and wine and law, every industry has its own terminology, and we have to ensure that translators speak that. And if I could, sorry.
Go ahead. What would be some examples of like words that are not like AI is going to confuse or interpret incorrectly?
There are words that exist in other languages that don't exist in English, and the words that exist in English that don't really translate or exist well in other languages. I just wanted to give you an AI example from your own book. We translated your book, Cracking the Celebrity Code. And the first pass, of course, was done by AI. And you have a wonderful sentence toward the very beginning. Okay, are you ready? Let's rock and roll. And the AI translated it literally as, are you ready? Are you ready to el rock and roll? And that does not work. So the human translator, the human professional master's level translator, had to go back and translate that expression, which means ultimately, are you ready to get started? Let's do this. So that's an example of where AI doesn't work well. Another wonderful example, there's a wonderful Danish word called hygge, H-Y-G-G-E, which has no direct English translation. It basically means the warm, fuzzy feeling you get, the quality you get when you're very content and comfortable, sort of like during the winter when you're sitting by a fire and in front of your fireplace. So if you put that in Google Translate, the translation becomes fun, which is not at all what that means. There are other words in Brazilian Portuguese, for example, ghosting, which means when you abruptly end a communication with someone without explaining why. There's apparently no word in Portuguese for that. A fallback position, a very common word in English, when you have an alternative contingency plan when the main plan falls through. There's no direct word for that in Portuguese. Or wonderful word like spoiler alert. The information spoils the surprise of a book or a TV show or a movie. There's no word for that in Portuguese. So again, these are examples of why AI alone doesn't work. And let me ask you an example. If I tell you, Ray, see those people over there? Let's go chat up the bird. What does that mean to you?
Let's go have a conversation with them.
Well, that's close, but that's British English.
Oh wait, to go talk to the girls.
Go talk to the girls.
The birds. I just got it. Yes. But yeah, if you're not aware of that, if you've never been around English culture, you would have no clue what that means.
And if you put that in Google Translate, it will come out literally, let's go discuss with the bird, which is not exactly what it means.
I love that. That's so good. So, but then, I mean, is it worth using AI for translation and or what can you use it and what's the different options that people have?
Well, it's worth using AI, but again, knowing that AI must be used, well, again, if you want perfection, if you want accuracy, it must be done with a combination, a hybrid combination with professional human linguists who will guarantee accuracy with the qualifications that I gave you about the master's degrees, the 10 years experience, the going into native language and cultural adaptation, and again, the subject terminology.
So what would, in your opinion, because we talked about, translating websites, translating books, translating blogs, translating social media, email marketing campaigns, for a company that, let's say, is an English English, predominantly English company, but they want to expand into the Hispanic, Spanish-speaking market. In order of importance or value, what would you say? Hey, let's start with the website. Let's go to the book. How would you do that? What would you recommend?
Yes, I would always start with the website, and uh, people then can have an immediate fear, like, well, what if someone contacts me in Spanish and I don't speak Spanish? Or what if someone calls me because I've got a phone number on my website? Um, what if someone calls me and I don't speak Spanish or Greek or Mongolian or whatever language you choose? And again, what people can do immediately is to send us the written message that people send, that the prospects have sent. We will translate that immediately from that language into English, translate your response from English into that language, and you can respond that way. And again, if it's a phone call, we can connect people with OPI, over the phone interpreting, so they can converse in that way. But certainly the website, I think, is the simplest, again, the simplest way to do it, or it's the way that is most client facing, what most every company has that would communicate with clients. And again, to remember that there are three ways to do it: the full website, the abridged website of the homepage, contact page, and 2 or 3 key product pages, and a summary, which is you're writing a Word file about your company, and we can then translate that into 20 or 30 languages.
So just to be clear, clients, who work with you, who translate their books, their websites, whatever it may be, also have an opportunity to contract you if they need to translate an email that they received or a text message, or even get someone on a phone to translate. You provide those additional services as well?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Again, certainly social media is worth doing. Books and videos are worth doing. It depends on, what content a company has and what kind of exposure a company wants.
And a logistical question, when it comes to the website, like the technology where they click on the little, flag and it changes to Spanish and then it changes to website, is that technology built in their website? Do you provide that? How do you support with that besides just the translation?
It's a very good question. Most websites now are built with that localization in mind, but not all. We've had cases where companies have websites that cannot be put into other languages. But I think that's pretty passé. That was the case perhaps about 7 years ago. But recently, I think most websites the websites are built with the capability to be put into other languages now, because they're built with modules, like little building blocks. And you take this and you take that and put them together, and they're configured for internationalization.
All right, I love that. And what would you say, in your opinion, in your experience, and your knowledge over the years, for an entrepreneur or a business owner who's considering doing translation or was looking for it, like what should they look for? What should they be aware of? Like, what are best practices when you're looking for this service?
Best practices is really to explore how a company does it. Again, I would not. A lot of people, again, think that AI alone can do it, or that amateurs can do it. And again, yes, they can do it. The issue is whether you want it done, or do you want it done correctly?
Right.
So, the first issue is to ask the questions about the process that I've stated about, what is your process to do it professionally, and how do you guarantee accuracy?
Got it. And how about turnaround time? Like on average, how long does this take?
We can do approximately 3,000 words a day. Again, it depends on the target language. It depends on the complexity. Depends on, are we doing scientific formulas with a lot of very deep explanation, or are we doing not so much a novel, but just straightforward business communication? So on average, a person can estimate 3,000 words a day. But when we give a quote, we will always give the price of the project with everything included, as well as the turnaround time. This will
Awesome.
take 3 to 5 days, or this will take 1 or 2 weeks, whatever.
So if somebody who's listening to this podcast wants to find out or get a quote on translating their website, their book, their blog, their marketing, their social media, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is really to go to the philip360.com. That's it's with one L, PHILIP, number 360.com. And that will bring you to our website, our newsletters, our podcasts, and all the other information that we have. And from our website, there will be a way to, you'll see at the top of our website, a way to get a quote. So in essence, for a quote, we will need to get your file or to know exactly, what it is you want. And of course, the languages. We used to get questions like, how long would it take to translate? Our contract? Well, splendid. Into which language, please? Which languages, please? It's a minor a minor question,
detail at the
detail that we do have to ask. But again, our own get quote page will ask that basic question, like what languages do you want, and please upload your file.
Awesome. So before we wrap up, Philip, is there anything else you want to add before we close?
Yes, a few quick points. First of all, on our website, on our corporate homepage, the Auerbach-intl.com homepage, there are 2 free gifts that people can obtain. One of them will say free guide, one of them will say free gift. Please download those. Those are obviously for you. The other point that I wanted to mention, and one of the free gifts will talk about this, that since we're talking about branding, there's an incredibly cheap insurance policy that people absolutely neglect. Corporate marketers neglect, and I'm talking about some of the biggest companies in the world forget, and that is to ask a language agency such as ours to evaluate their brand name, their company name, their product name, and their slogans in other languages.
Wow.
Because they forget this. So I will give you let me give you 2 examples. Very interestingly, the automotive companies are the ones that are probably the worst examples of this. Ford introduced the Pinto car in Brazil. We had the Ford Pinto here, I think, in 1970. He introduced it in Brazil, and our Brazilian listeners will know that this is already very amusing, because Pinto in Brazilian slang means, shall we say, small male genitals. Not the best name for a car. Now, another example of that, there's a famous brand of tissues that was, again, launched into Europe, an American brand called Puffs. Most Americans would know of Puffs. And the manufacturer launched it in Europe, totally unaware that a puff in British English means what we would derogatorily call a fag, a homosexual, not a good name for a product. And in German, Puff, ein Puff, basically means a whorehouse. Again, not a good name for a product. So if you are launching your company name, your brand name, your slogans, your logos, your colors, please ask us as your professional language agency to evaluate these in 10 top languages. It is very cheap insurance to ensure that you do not make our bloopers list, that I do not use you on a future podcast, and of course that there are no gaffes, there are no mistakes that you have overlooked before you invest hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars doing that. And then the final point is that basically just to remember that communicating your value in other languages enables you to certainly get more exposure for your company among either US ethnic groups or, of course, abroad, can bring you additional revenue streams, can enhance your image, and really shows your concern for the client. Because remember, as said in the very beginning, around 60% of world internet users will only buy from companies if information is in their own language. So if you're not doing that, you're not showing that you're truly concerned. And we want to ensure that, again, you expand your business and you bring the benefits of your products or services to a world audience.
I love that. That's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing. That was really good. I love the insurance, like just, because you never know if you're going to expand in the future as your business grows and you want to go internationally. You don't want to have your product be something that people are not going to want to be associated with. So that was really good.
Yes,
I appreciate it.
You do not want to make my bloopers list. And I hope
no, we don't want to be on Philip's bloopers list. So thank you for joining me, Philip. I really appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for being on the show. And if you're listening and you want to connect with Philip, you want to learn more about translation for your business, your products, your service, your website, your books, you name it, go to Philip with one L, Philip360.com. And thank you so much again, Philip. Have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you.